こんにちは。アルファアドバイザーズの坂下です。今日はアメリカの MBA のキャリア最前線ということで、MBA に行った後のキャリア、コンサルティングファーム、それからガーファム、金融、アセットマネジメント、ヘッジファンド、AI に関する仕事などなど、アメリカの就職に関する最新事情を現役の MBA のキャリアヘッドの方にお話ししてもらおうと思います。で、アメリカの MBA、MBA に限らないんですけれども、キャリアヘッドとか、キャリアオフィスといったものがあって、卒業生の就職先だったりを管理していたり、やはりもう最前線で MBA の就職活動を見ている人たちというのが各学校でいます。で、その中でもキャリアサポートが手厚い学校であったり、比較的公認であったりする学校があるんですけども、今日はもう最前線でこの MBA のキャリアを10年以上見ているキャリアヘッドの方に来ていただいてます。で、キャリアヘッドの方は、キャリアオフィスのね、管理をしたりとか、あといわゆるレジュメとか面接、インタビューの練習をしたり、あとは卒業生ですね。卒業生のネットワークというのも、アメリカ、特にアメリカ、海外の MBA のキャリアでは非常に大事なので、その卒業生のネットワークをどう活用するかとか、もうすべて知り尽くしているところです。で、特に最近 MBA、米国の MBA を出た後ですね、コンサルティングファームは結構就職先を絞っているとか、ガーファムもね、ビッグテックも大きなレイオフをしたりっていうこともあるので、実際どうなのかっていうところをね、特にインターナショナルスチューデント、日本からであったり、アメリカ以外からアメリカに行って就職をするところの難易度とか最近のトレンド、がっつり聞いていきたいと思います。アルファアドバイザーズでは17年間、社会人の方のキャリアサポートをしてきました。で、キャリアサポート、キャリアアップの手段として、MBA とか大学院の留学をして、そこから現地ですね、アメリカであったり、欧州であったり、シンガポール、アジアであったりするんですけど、海外で就職する方も最近とても増えてます。日本もだいぶね、いろいろな、政治的何かいろいろな混乱があったりしてですね、あとは教育の面でも、自分のみならず、お子さんも含めて海外で、家族で、子供を育てたいとか、みんなで海外に住みたいという方も多いです。金銭的にも、やはりね、海外の方が給与水準が高かったり、グローバルどこでも働けるようになったりしていますね。で、アルファではもちろん留学だけではなくて、転職活動、日本での転職活動もサポートしていますので、今日は特にアメリカの MBA、それからポスト MBA のキャリアについてお話しするんですけど、キャリア全般のこと、転職 MBA 迷っている、などなど、いつでもご相談ください。でアルファではこのキャリア戦略っていうのをね、まず皆さんとお話しするのが今大人気です。間違いなく、グローバルなキャリア、それも、やっぱり一貫したキャリアを作っていくということにおいては、もうアルファは日本で唯一、世界で唯一こういった一貫したキャリアサポートをしてるんじゃないかなと思いますし、最近は、やはり海外で就職する方の成功例もとても増えているので、海外で活躍したいな、働きたいな、もっと稼ぎたいな、などなど、皆さんぜひお越しください。今の業界を出たいという方もいますし、あとは特定の業界、外銀とか PE ファンドに行きたい、ガーファムに行きたい、そういう方もね、たくさん来てくれています。で、最初にお知らせです。これ8月30日、もう明日なんですけど、土曜日にエディション虎ノ門で欧米アジアトップ MBA が来るイベントがあります。午前中からお昼過ぎにかけて行われるんですけど、この中でもこの MBA がどうキャリアグロースに効いてくるのかとか、あとは女性と MBA のキャリアのパネルディスカッションもありまして、私がモデレーターをさせていただくんですけども、ぜひ皆さん来てください。あとはね、いろんな学校が来ているので、直接学校の担当者の人と話せたり、日本からも頑張っていこうっていう前向きな人たちがたくさん集まるイベントなので、ぜひ、ちょっとでも入退場自由で無料なので、ぜひ来てください。概要欄にリンクがあります。そちらから登録してご参加ください。はい。そして、ハルトインターナショナルビジネススクールの MBA、マスター、あとは学部ですね。ハルトさんはビジネススクールで MBA が もあるんですけど、その他若手向けのマスターとか、あとは学部、いわゆる大学生、4年生の大学もあります。で、アメリカ、それからイギリスはロンドン、ドバイとキャンパスがあるんですけども、日本人の方もね、すごく最近優秀でアグレッシブな方がたくさん増えていて、日本で外銀とか入る方もいますし、あとはアメリカの就職もとても強いんですね。卒業生の83%がアメリカで就職をすると。パーセンテージで言うと、私たちが見る限り、もう最もアメリカの就職成功率が高い。そして、やはりそこにコミットを持ってね、皆さん目的意識がある方がとても多いです。で、アルファの奨学金ができたので、なんと400万とかもらえればですね、奨学金、アルファの奨学金がきちんともらえると、600万、400万とか、普通の MBA の3分の1以下、もっとかな、4分の1以下の投資で、実際就職しているのは、いわゆる2000万、3000万、払ってですね、行く MBA と、結構卒業後、皆さん同じような会社に入っていまして、なんか ROI 高いよねということで、ご紹介したいと思います。なので、ハルトさん興味あるよっていう方はぜひ来てください。皆さん結局はですね、複数いくつか学校を受けて、その中から選ぶという感じなので、学校選びの相談もしていただきながら、ハルトも興味あるよという方は、ぜひお知らせください。はい。あと、シンガポールですね。これは、アメリカと少し方向性が違って、シンガポール。でシンガポール行きたいという方も、一定数というか、最近かなり人気がありまして、シンガポール行きたいという方はね、あんまりアメリカに行きたいとかにってならないんですけども、シンガポール行きたいという方は SMU とか、その他にも NUS とかね、トップスクールもありますので、ぜひシンガポールも皆さんご興味がある方はご相談ください。アメリカとシンガポールがやはり金融にも、シンガポールもね、SMU も南安理工大学とかも結構ガーファームに入っていたりもしますし、はい、なんかその卒業後のキャリアの伸びというのはね、とてもいい学校が多いので、ぜひ興味ある方は来てください。であとは USCPA ですね。これは、アメリカで就職する際にも、例えばビッグフォーとかアメリカで入る方もいるんですけど、その時にも持っているとプラスになりますし、MBA よりは、MBA 取る場合は MBA 優先でいいと思うんですけど、MBA 受験しながら USCPA 取るという方もいますので、USCPA 興味あるよっていう方もぜひ来てください。まずは英語でね、いろいろ学ぶという意味では、UC サンディエゴのオンラインコース、取っていただくと、なんかちょっとステップインするというかね、グローバルキャリアに一歩近づく道になると思いますし、UCPA は単位がないと受験ができないので、この UCSD、UC サンディエゴのオンラインコース、アルファで割引がありますので、ぜひ使ってください。はい。あとはね、USCPA の教材も半額になりますね。いわゆる、世界で最も使われている教材じゃないかなと思いますけれども、アルファで半額で買うことができます。で、個別のキャリアのご相談は、ぜひこちらまでお越しください。皆さんの状況をまずはこちらで伺って、その上で MBA だったら MBA。あと若手の方だったらね、もうマスター、最近そのまま大学卒業して海外のマスターに行くとかいう方もいますし、で、もちろん転職もサポートしてます。ちょうどね、外資系のアセットマネジメントとかコンサルティングの会社さんから、結構アルファはね、やっぱり優秀で専門性がある方が多いですし、英語ができる方も多いので、英語ができて、こういった専門性がある人いないですかっていうふうに言われているので、アセマネとかコンサルファーム行きたい方はね、ぜひ来てください。そこは転職のサポートでやっております。はい。皆さんのご相談お待ちしております。で、今日はですね、アメリカ、MBA のキャリアヘッドの方が来ていただいているので、この後の中身は英語でやっていくんですけど、スライドも分かりやすいかなと思いますので、最後の方はね、ちょっと日本語で必要に応じて補足しようと思いますけれども、皆さんどんどんご質問も入れていただいて、この MBA の最新事情を見ていただきたいなと思います。はい。ということで。So I will use English from here. So thank you for joining this webinar on today's theme and US MBA career frontline about consulting firm and GAFA. big tech and also asset management firm and AI. So what's really happening? So we have an amazing guest from Hart International Business School, career coach for more than 10 years. And we will dive into the very real and practical ways of how MBA can be leveraged to the postgraduate career. And my name is Emi, CEO of Alpha Advisors and career and education advisory firm, supporting many professionals to pursue top MBAs and global career for more than 17 years. And our clients has been successfully accepted to top business school and also top-notch companies like Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, and BlackRock, and so on. So let's dive into today's topic for MBA career frontline with career head and amazing guest, Nav. So thank you very much for your time, Nav.
Great, thank you. I was sitting here stressing because I thought, I hope I don't have to speak in Japanese because I didn't learn. But I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get into to today's session, right? So everyone here is considering studying abroad, and if you're considering studying abroad, chances are you're thinking of working abroad as well, right? So maybe pivoting your career from a country standpoint. My name is Nav. As you heard, I am the head of career development and employer relations for Halt International Business School here in Boston. I've been with Halt since 2012. I started in our Dubai campus, and after that, transitioned into a global role where I got to actually visit all of our campus locations at the time, from Shanghai all the way to San Francisco, all within the career development team. My passion really is helping people understand sort of who they are, where they fit in the world of work, creating strategies to find gainful employment, but particularly for people who are looking for work abroad, right? Finding a job anywhere, even if you're in Japan right now and you're looking for a job, if you're here in the United States, you're looking for a job, finding a job is difficult in itself, right? It's not an easy thing to do. Add the layers of complexity, trying to find a job in a country, in a city that is foreign to is a lot more difficult. And so my team and myself specialize in helping people make that career transition and pivot. It's important to note because Halt International Business School here in Boston, in our post-grad programs, 98% of our students are international. So we focus on helping people make those international transitions, right? So finding employment in a country that is not considered their home country. Whereas, some of the other schools have, 20%, 30%, 40, 50, 60%, but they're still dealing with domestic students largely, right? And so I like to think that, we are specialists when it comes to international mobility. All right, today we're going to take you through some employment trends and outlook in the United States. What is the labor market looking like? Where does opportunity exist? There's a lot of scary headlines in the news. So let's unpack some of that, right? We'll look at employment visa strategy. As an international student, you have to stay on top of, how does work authorization work? What types of visas are afforded to me as an international student? And maybe what are some of the advantages, right? So depending on where we're from, what country we're from, there are some advantages, right? And so I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about, the E1 and E2 treaty visas, right? Which, might be of benefit to you. I'm going to talk about how we, as a careers team here, how does my team support your career goals as a student? And then we'll just touch on some resources for specific to Japanese nationals. So let's look at the current employment outlook, right? I said it earlier, but it could be a little intimidating when you look at the news, right? And you think about, okay, well, the economy is not doing so great. Unemployment is creeping up. Inflation is high. There's government policy and changes that are affecting things. And it's easy to get into this mindset that it's very grim, right? But let's look at it. So on the left-hand side here, I've got the unemployment rate for the United States, right? In July of 2025, it was at 4.2%. That's the left. That's the graph on the left. Now, 4.2% is a lot, right? I mean, relative to, where we might have been decades ago. But when you look at it, coming out of the pandemic, or you look at the financial crisis of 2009, we're nowhere near those levels, right? So there's panic, but there's not cause to to panic to the levels as we were during the financial crisis. The right hand side, though, right, what I want you to take away from it is though the unemployment rate is 4.2%, it's a lot lower for those who have a bachelor degree or above, right? So a lot of the unemployment in the United States, right, is attributed to you would say lower skilled labor, right, less educated labor, so people with high school or no high school degrees whatsoever. But when you look at bachelor degrees and above, it's at 2.7%. And it's not, if you look at the timeline there, this is the green, it's not it's not as dire as looking at a 4.2% unemployment rate. So I want you to take away that. So sometimes when we look at the news, we have to dig deeper, get a little bit more granular, and understand what is happening. For those of you who want to track this on your own, this comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States. So it's a government owned website where they publish unemployment data or employment data in general, not just unemployment. They look at a bunch of other factors as well. And you can look at this. It's free to use, and you can monitor it and extract data to your liking. All right. So, but the news says a lot, right? You'll hear about tech layoffs here. You'll hear about uh, companies downsizing or the labor market normalizing. And there's a lot of people who, and I think that Wall Street Journal wrote about this earlier last year, which was, it's harder and harder for MBA graduates to find work. I don't know if you guys seen that article, but you'll stumble upon it. You guys are aspiring MBA students and business school students. I'm sure you've read some of these articles, right? Where, it said Harvard Business School graduates for the first time ever, 25% of them struggled to find work after graduation. It's very interesting, right? Because you would think a school with the legacy of Harvard, right, and the connections that it affords if you're going to that school would do well in the labor market. But yet, 25% of their MBA grads didn't find work. I'll tell you something. We were interested in that article because our graduates, we didn't see 25% of them struggle in the labor market. We still had, posted an 86% employment rate that year for our MBA graduates. So we actually contacted the writer at the Wall Street Journal. Her name is Lindsay Ellis, and we asked her about this. We said, and she couldn't give us, some of the details of the private information, but we asked her, why would Harvard graduates struggle this year? And it was a good conversation. And I think about this, right? A Harvard graduate is pretty set in their expectations, right? In terms of they want to work in finance. They're typically thinking New York City, right? They want to work in consulting. It's BCG, Bain, McKinsey, right? They want to work in finance. There's Goldman Sachs, right? But they're very fixed in terms of like what their expectations are after graduation, and that presents a problem when the labor market is changing. So the labor market isn't dead. The labor market is changing. And if you are still fixed with some of these expectations, then you may find yourself struggling to find the opportunity that you desire. Let me show you how that works, right? First and foremost, now more than ever, the labor market is changing. You read the news, you see like these new tariffs come into place, or you see government policy impacting things like climate initiatives, right? So the World Economic Forum published a report, The Future of Jobs, right? The Future of Work, and it projected up to 2030. Well, when they created that report, it's a lot of research and insight that was collected 2, 3, 4 years ago. Well, here comes a new president, right, in the United States of America, who wants to pull back from climate initiatives. So where the World Economic Forum projected tremendous growth in sustainability and ESG and jobs stemming from that, well, now that's flatlined because you have a president that has come in and said, that's not important to us. And not just for America, but America influences a lot in the world. And so there's other companies or countries for that matter, sorry, that have also backed out of climate initiatives. So what I want you to take from that is when you're planning a job search, and going back to the Harvard graduates who have fixed expectation, right? You got to be flexible because geopolitics is going to influence, what industries and what jobs are going to be available in the near future. And this is not long term. We know that presidents come and go, right? And so this is not long term, right? But in the very short term, if I'm somebody who was, thinking about climate tech and sustainability, I just need to be aware that the volume of those jobs has shrunk, right? Similarly, when you think about tariffs, the last time steel tariffs were introduced in the United States, there was a 75,000 reduction in jobs in steel consuming industries, right? So again, it's just something that when I'm thinking about my job search, I can't just go into it with a mindset that says, I love steel industry, I'm great at project management, and I want to work in the United States. That's cool, but something has happened recently that is going to impact the viability of those jobs. So we have to stay tuned. So my team, I've got a predictive analyst on my team who does this. All he does, he spends 10 hours a week monitoring economic and geopolitical data, right, and information. And then we start to create forecasts that say, okay, well, how is that going to affect some of the jobs that historically we've seen graduates go to? And it's just to tell graduates, right? Everyone's an adult here, is to say, here's what the labor market is going to look like for the interest area that you have, right? Not to say that it's disappeared, but it's going to be a lot more challenging. So don't put all of your eggs into that basket, right? The other thing is, like, if you've been following the news, you know that, one day an announcement will be made and it impacts the stock market, right? And it impacts, trade between countries. That's how it's been. It's a little bit of a circus, so to speak, yeah? But what I want you to take away from that is this stuff is changing ever so fast that don't worry about what's happening today, per se, because you are intending to come to school and graduate, I would imagine, 2027 or maybe beyond. By then, whatever is happening today is going to look different. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. For better or for worse, don't ask me that. But I can just tell you it's going to be different, right? So when you're thinking about it, what my team has our students, think about is, what can you control, right? Don't worry about these external, factors that are influencing the labor market. What can you control yourself, and then how do we navigate or pivot from what we're seeing? Here's a graph, not a graph, a chart. It's the United States, and I titled this "The Migration of Jobs Obtained by Halt Graduates." One thing that we are seeing, and this was coming out of lockdown, out of COVID, as people started to return to work, right? Well, two things happened. Well, first, if you look at the United States and you look at population, we started to see people move out of the East and West Coast, which are heavily populated, right? So like the state of California, and then your East Coast, like your New York City, you saw people, because they now have this like remote work flexibility, they moved out of those expensive cities, and they started to move to the interior of the United States. So you can see this. You'll see a lot of people move from California to the state of Texas, New York to the state of Florida. Now, warmer weather, maybe that was part of it as well, but the other thing is cost of living is a lot cheaper. So if I have a remote job, or now I have a remote job because my company has figured out by necessity that the offices are closed and we can engage in remote work, well, now you start to see population move from the exterior of the United States to the interior. Now, once population does that, commerce follows, right? Industry follows. And so then you started to see companies relocate from California to places like Austin, Texas, Dallas, Texas, right? Salt Lake City, Utah. Okay. And so now what we're seeing is, in the past, where we had the bulk of our graduates find work on the East and West Coast of the United States, which also that's where we had campuses, right? San Francisco, we had Boston, we have a New York rotation center. Now we're seeing the employment is gradually moving from the East and West Coast, where it used to be heavily populated, to the interior of the United States, right? And that's just our data. That's just when we look at our employment outcome data, we started to see this on the map, that there's this movement, right? But now you're starting to see this being published. So you can go to Wall Street Journal, LinkedIn publishes this. This is from a website called Checker that looks at a lot of this data. But they just recently, last week, published what they titled America's Best Cities for Employment Opportunity in 2025. And you can go to the website to see sort of what the methodology was around it. But look, you can start to see those dots. You have, North Carolina, Durham, Charlotte, Raleigh, North Carolina, right? Then you have Charleston, South Carolina, that's on that list. Utah, Des Moines, Iowa, Kansas City, Missouri, right? Nashville, Tennessee. One thing that's not on here, but now we start to talk about, depending on what your area of expertise is and what you're looking for, if you're into automotive, and let's just say supply chain automotive, right? While Toyota has invested heavily in Huntsville, Alabama, right? And so again, coming from abroad, when you think about automotive and you think about the United States, old school was like there was Detroit, Michigan. There was the auto mecca of not just the United States, but the world for that matter. Well, actually now Mercedes-Benz, Nissan, Toyota, massive, massive facilities in Huntsville, Alabama, right? And so it's one of these things that we have to sort of break free from what we only know. Coming from abroad, when you're coming to America, you know New York, you know San Francisco, you know Boston, you know Los Angeles, maybe Chicago, right? Miami, Florida, right? But you know those because you're foreign, right? And these are popular tourist destinations. They're in Hollywood, they're in, on TV, so you know these things. However, you start to peel back the layers of economic growth and population movement, you start to see there are actually jobs everywhere in the United States. And depending on what my industry preference is, the companies that are for me might actually be in some of these areas I've never actually explored or thought about before, right? LinkedIn published, so if you're not sort of mid-senior, LinkedIn published what they called fastest growing cities for new graduates. So if you're more early career, what LinkedIn looked at is the availability of jobs, job growth, and then they looked at cost of living, right? Because if you're early grad, you're not yet at a salary where, you could be living in New York City per se on your own. It's expensive. And then they came up with this list, right? And then you can also see that this list is also more so the interior of the United States than the heavily populated East and West Coast. So here's how you overcome, the challenging job market. Yeah, they don't call it a recession, but it sure feels like it here, right? I'm not sure what it feels like in Japan right now, but it feels like a recession here, right? There's a lot of talk about the economy and the shrinking middle class and things of that nature, right? So how do you overcome this, right? Well, the first thing is you be flexible. You have backup plans in some of these markets where competition isn't steep. I don't have it in this presentation, but usually when I'm talking to prospective students, I share with them the story that in the last 24 months, we have 17 graduates at Goldman Sachs. None of them in New York City. None, right? Goldman Sachs has 250,000 graduates that apply every year to their company, right? Most of the time, they're applying to Goldman Sachs in New York City. So New York City gets a lot of attention. The competition for working at Goldman Sachs in New York City is steep. As an international student, it's not just between international students, domestic students. All of those students studying at New York Stern School of Business, if they want to work for Goldman Sachs, they're all looking at New York City. They're not leaving, right? So now there's an opportunity because Goldman Sachs is not just in New York City. They have a big office in Salt Lake City that doesn't get a lot of attention by job seekers. So here, we found this out. We started to hear the recruiters having trouble closing job requisitions in Salt Lake City. So then our students started slowly applying and getting noticed, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Now we have 17 graduates in Goldman Sachs, right? JP Morgan, the same thing. Yeah, JP Morgan's got a beautiful new office, by the way. It recently just opened up in a new building in New York City. It's an architectural marvel, right? But guess what? They froze hiring over there for the time being. It's not going to be forever. These things are cyclical, right? We know they're going to come back. It's cool. But for the time being, they froze hiring. Guess what? They are hiring, though, in Dallas, and they are hiring in Ohio. So now you have to ask yourself, right? Go back to that Harvard mentality. I want to work with JP Morgan, right? I want to work in investment banking. Right now, they're not hiring in New York City. Am I willing to go to Dallas? Now, as a domestic student, US national, maybe they'll wait it out. They'll go back home, they'll live with their parents in their basement. They're cool, right? They're cool. As an international student, you don't have that affordability, right? You have a finite amount of time to have a job and report it on OPT to be able to stay. So this is what we teach our students, right? We track all of these things. We track movement in sort of what offices are sort of underpopulated, which ones are oversaturated, what's more competitive, and we talk to students about backup plans. We're not saying abandon your plan to, be the wolf of Wall Street and live in New York City. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is have a backup plan. If that one doesn't work out, wouldn't it be wonderful to at least get your foot in the door with JP Morgan and do it in Dallas? Oh, and by the way, Dallas is cheaper, so you'll save more money as well, right? So if you want to travel, these are things that you gotta think about. All right, be tactful, right? So merely applying for jobs online isn't really effective, right? When you apply for a job online, your application is being received by something called an applicant tracking system. It's a piece of software that's reading your resume. It's determining whether you are a match for the job specs. The computer is doing some work there, right? I don't know, how comfortable you are with that, but I wouldn't leave the fate of my job, my ability to get a job up to a computer, right? So, what we do is we tell students before you start applying online, make sure you found the hiring manager. So we'll teach you how to do that here. We call it hacking LinkedIn, but we teach how to get to the root of who the hiring manager is, connect with them before you put your application online. Because there's a lot of ways that an applicant tracking system can, remove you from the application process. And sometimes, I got to warn you, there's always a question that these companies will ask, do you require sponsorship now or in the future? And as soon as you answer yes, for some companies, it is a disqualifier. However, we know from the visa data that those companies do sponsor, right? But the system is set up when you have 250,000 applicants a year to reduce that applicant packet down to a more manageable size. And how do you do that? You put in, the disqualifying questions, and sometimes that's do you require sponsorship, right? So you get what we do is we say don't apply online and just leave it at that. Make sure you're connecting with the hiring manager, and we'll teach you exactly how to do that. Leverage your value proposition. Bilingual and bicultural capabilities, super important for particularly Japanese nationals, because we talk a little bit about the treaty visas that come with it. I'm going to get to that in a second. Be humble. Understand the labor market is just that. We're trading time, right? You're trading your time and skills for money. It's simple as that. It's a labor market. So understand where your time and your skills are being required, what industry, what city for that matter, what company is looking for that, but understand that that's what we're doing here. And in doing that, understand you're not the customer in this process. You're applying for a job. This is not about you, actually. It's about what does that employer need, right? They're the customer. They're buying your talent. Yeah. And once you understand that, you're better suited to go into conversations with hiring managers and articulate, why you're best suited for the job. Let's talk about employment visa strategy, right? Typical path for a Japanese national. So let's say you're from Japan. This is how you come to the United States. You come in on an F1 visa. This is your student visa. It allows you to stay and study in the United States. After that, you have this ability to engage in an internship through something called curricular practical training. It's called CPT. It's cool because it allows you to work as an intern for money or for pay or without pay, unpaid or paid, but it allows you to work as an intern during study. After that, you graduate, you've got access to OPT, valid for up to 1 year, so long as you're working in a field that aligns with your degree. And here's the cool thing. If you're qualifying, graduating with a qualifying STEM designation, then you get an additional 2 years of OPT. It's a STEM extension. So in total, you could get up to 3 years. After that, so people often ask, well, what happens after OPT is done? Like, what does life after OPT look like? Well, now we introduce this notion that an employer has to sponsor you. So up until now, OPT and STEM OPT, CPT, employers don't have to do anything. It's hassle-free for them, right? But once that expires, now we're talking about you've got to get a petition for an H-1B visa that'll allow you to stay and work in the United States for 3 years, extendable for another 3 years, or there are these things called the E1 and E2, and these are treaty visas, right? And for particularly Japanese nationals, E1 and E2 is a very lucrative proposition, right? So what does that mean, right? E1 is a treaty trader visa, so you can be employed at a company that is at least 50% Japanese owned and that conducts substantial trade between Japan and the United States. Now, we teach our students how to find said companies, right? So it's great to know that, this is possible. But now how do I find those companies that are 50% Japanese owned? So we have resources to help our students find those companies. Some of them are very well known, right? Like Sony or what. Some of them are super well known. And then there's some that are maybe not the massive conglomerates. They're mid-sized players or even small businesses, but they qualify under this. And the other one is the E2 investor visa. So you can be employed by a company that has at least 50% Japanese owned that has made substantial investment in the United States, right? So the only caveat is you have to be a Japanese national and you must be working in an executive, supervisory, or essential skills position, which if you're graduating from a business school, with a, analytics specialization, for example, or finance specialization, then obviously you qualify, right? Here's what we look at these different visa types and outcomes for Japanese nationals. Here's what it looks like in practice, right? So, for example, your first path is U.S. direct hire. Let's say you're a financial analyst. It's MUFG, Union Bank. You get hired on OPT. When your OPT expires, petition the H-1B, and now you're working with them under H-1. With Rakuten, there's the E-visa, right? So again, it's Japanese owned company with presence in the United States. And so strategy associate, right? A transfer, we didn't talk about this, but if you are transferring from one company to another, so Sony Japan to Sony US, they usually can facilitate that under an L1 or an L2, and that's an intercompany transfer. You have to be, but you have to be employed. So for example, if you are currently working at Sony and you quit Sony and you come to school, what I would say is ask Sony for a leave of absence. So what we've seen some students do this before they get here. They ask their employer for a leave of absence, which works when your employer is also maybe sponsoring your education. But by putting you on a leave of absence, you're technically still employed and then eligible for L1, L2 transfer, right? STEM OPT, Amazon does this a lot, right? With our graduates, is they hire them on OPT and then they petition for an H-1B as they get closer to the end of the STEM OPT, right? You can always return to Japan. You can take your education, go back to Japan in a more prominent role. And then Persona, North America, again, which is a Japanese-owned company, does a lot with E1s, right? And sponsors Japanese nationals under the E1 protocol. In terms of my team, the way that we help our students, we provide digital tools so that they could sharpen, for example, LinkedIn Learning. They could gain certifications that make them more employable, right? We leverage generative AI. So we're going to teach you how to use generative AI to sharpen things like your resume, your LinkedIn, to make sure that it's optimized against jobs that you're interested in. We run these things called career labs. These are not your typical workshops that you get at schools from their careers teams. This is where we actually go through economic and geopolitical data. We share it with the students and we derive insights and talk about strategy. Now that we are presented with this, in this quarter of the United States, how do we navigate it, or how are we going to navigate it by the time our students graduate? They're very, I don't want to call them technical, but this is where we go deep, right? We go deep. One-to-one advisory, you all get your own career advisor, depending on the program that you're in. And our career advisors here in Boston are subject matter experts. I told you I've got a predictive analyst. Well, he is the guy that coaches our analytics students, whether you're a Master of Business Analytics or an MBA with STEM track, that you get that subject matter expert. Likewise, I've got a finance professional that looks after our finance-bound graduates. And then, like all schools, we do a lot of events, networking and employer events where you get to meet our alumni and employers. Here's an example of one. This academic year, we held an event with JP Morgan Chase. We've got alumni. She brought some of her senior executives to meet with our students to talk about careers at JP Morgan. How do you progress to JP Morgan? How do you apply, particularly as an international student, to JP Morgan? So these are the types of events that you could look forward to. The one thing that I will say that's visible with our graduates, particularly from Japan, has been this, right? The Boston Career Forum, and there's an equivalent one on the West Coast as well. But going back to what I had said earlier about the E1 and E2 visas, this is a surefire way to find those employers that actually sponsor under E1 and E2, right? And so we encourage our students to go to this. They don't necessarily have to be Japanese. This particular career fair is looking just for bilingual Japanese English speakers, but the employers that are present, many of them do hire under those E1 and E2 visas, right? And with our particular set of graduates in the last 3 years, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, KPMG, Citibank, Accenture, these have been outcomes with our students who have attended. So we plug this a lot, and it happens in November of this year. One of the employers that is coming to this career forum is a company called Santec, and we have an alum at Santec who is in charge of recruitment. And so Santec, though they're going to this Boston Career Forum, they're coming to our campus to meet our students ahead of time, right? So before, I was saying before they get to see the 1,000 resumes that they're going to get on November 21st, they're going to get to see our students who meet the requirements. So we're looking forward to things like that. But I can't stress enough how important it is, to go there to meet again those organizations, those companies that qualify for those treaty visas, right? It's a great return on your investment of time, right? Really. Perfect. And then just lastly, what I wanted to share, when we talk about, there's a lot of talk about the future of work, right? And, a lot of talk about AI and, what AI is going to displace in the way of work. I don't know if you've recently read MIT published an article 2 weeks ago, right? Where their hypothesis is 95% of these companies that are claiming to have AI aren't going to last. So it's like a dot-com bubble, 5% will. Again, crystal ball, depending on who you're talking to, they'll purport to telling you what the future of work looks like. The future is this. We all just have to be better at learning, right? And we have to be committed to continuous learning, right? Because as things change around us, we need to be able to adjust, to learn, and to grow with those changes, right? That's all we can do. Going back to what can we control? We can control ourselves and our ability to continue to learn. The cool thing about HALT is, as an alumni, you can come back and take 2 electives per year with us, right? So, we've got rotation centers in Singapore, and we have rotation centers in New York, and then you can come to our Boston campus, rotation center in San Francisco, London, Dubai, and you can take electives as an alum, 2 per year, right? Where all you're paying is $100 for a course material fee. But this is your way to continue to grow and learn as, the world of work changes around us. Okay, that's all I have. Trust me, if you give me the time, I could talk about this for like 5 hours, but I'm gonna stop there and let's get into some Q&A.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very fascinating and amazing presentation and your analysis and sharing the current trends. So actually, I couldn't agree more about the fact and like strategic job hunting. So I very much understand. So actually, we heard from Shinpei-san, so a lot of HALT's graduate successful job placement. But now I fully understand how graduates have so successful job placement at the United States and also like top-notch company like Goldman Sachs and even such kind of not so easy market for MBA. So the adaptation and strategic analysis and also execution. So such kind of leadership as you at Career Support would be invaluable to students, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yeah, so let's move to Q&A session with audience. So actually we have a lot of questions. So, okay. So the first one, yeah, so from the audience, at HALT, do students receive advice such as, for example, if you want to join Goldman Sachs at the United States, you should apply to this division in this region or on an individual basis. So can students receive such kind of advice from career office or career coach?
Yeah, absolutely, right. So, that's what I was talking about. When I said, we became fully aware that JP Morgan, for example, had froze hiring in New York City, but Dallas and Ohio were open, right? Because we follow that. So what we do is we first of all, our career advisors, they follow their area of expertise. So my finance career advisor follows obviously all of financial news, but also recruitment trends within the world of finance, and not just investment banking, but corporate finance, private equity, venture capital, right? And then what we do is we tap into our alumni. And so we actually did we met with 30 finance professionals across JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and BlackRock in New York City this summer, We took our finance students, we went to New York City, and we had sort of a mix and mingle, a networking event, right? And it's in doing that our alumni who supported us in that event gave us that insight, right? Like, here's who's hiring in our office, in our building today. Here's what's frozen, and then here's where the opportunity exists. So it's a combination of our career advisors keeping on top of industry trend, and then us tapping into alumni, right, for them to give us things that might be more insider, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, such kind of insider information is very crucial for the candidates, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The next question. So, Shinpei-san often mention how hires out, which means hard graduates have some great referral. Also, they sometimes post their job openings to hard student community. So, which is one of the reasons why hard students have such a strong track record in the U.S. job market, that alumni from various industries actively provide reference support and other help to current students.
That's right. So, the first thing that we tell our students is, the low-hanging fruit when you're an international student in the United States is to find companies that have hired international students before, right? So for example, I can tell you right now, American Express does not like to hire international graduates. So if any of you had your heart set on American Express, they have this internal policy that says they're not going to go out and hire international graduates. So don't waste your time. Visa, MasterCard, go ahead, right? But American Express, Capital One, they do it. American Express, for whatever reason, maybe it's because they have American in the name, I don't know, but they have a policy where they don't petition H-1B unless they have someone transferring from like American Express, Canada or UK or somewhere else into the United States. They don't do it out of school. So that's important to know. So the first thing is, the best place to look is companies who have hired international students before, that they're international graduate friendly. Let's start there. Now, the additional icing on the cake is, where did the Hall graduates go? Because if a company hired a Hall graduate, two things happened. One, they've demonstrated comfort in hiring an international graduate. Secondly, if the Hall alum has been there for more than, a year, 2 years, then we know they're satisfied with the Hall graduates' work. So what ends up happening is we tap into our alums who are out in the world of work in the United States, and we start to solicit their support in things like referrals. So I told you Santec, for example, that company that is coming before the Japanese Career Fair, that's because of our alum that is in there, facilitated that connection, right? And has got the company to be receptive to our talent, right? JP Morgan, the same thing. We only did that event in New York City with those professionals because our alum who works at asset and wealth management at JP Morgan facilitated that, right? So we leverage our alums. Any school is only as good as their alums at the end of the day.
Mm. Yeah, I heard such kind of like a New York financial group, alumni group, like Shinpei-san mentioned about that. That is very great community, and yeah, I think student can catch up the up-to-date information. Thank you. So the next question is, I think it's for especially Japanese or international candidates. So thank you very much for the great insight. If I studied at Harvard, is there any chance for me to get job, especially investment banking or asset management firm in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to be careful with where that job is, right? So again, we know JP Morgan froze hiring for asset and wealth management in New York City, but they're open in Dallas and they're open in Ohio, right? The other thing that we're going to see is, depending on how the economy shifts in the near future, you just want to be cognizant that investment banking might not be so hot, right, as an industry. And again, when the economy is tight, people don't have money, there's not going to be a whole lot of investment going on. However, what we do see is what a good sort of holding place, because it doesn't mean investment banking is not going to, come back and thrive. It just means that it's affected right now. So what would you do in the meantime? Maybe look at private equity, right? Maybe look at venture capital, particularly if you're not coming from experience yet with investment banking. In VC and private equity are good stepping stones to investment banking anyway. So it's a good place to to start, but also to look in the times when maybe there's not a massive availability of investment banking jobs. Investment banking is competitive anyway, whether it's a good economy or bad economy, right? It's going to be in a competitive space, but particularly in a downturn economy, it's not something that is that has a lot of health. Let's put it that way.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. So as you mentioned, the JP Morgan like frozen for a recruitment at New York office. So just curious. So where do you collect such kind of update information, or how frequently you collect the information and share the information in your team or
Yeah, we look at it monthly. Like we
monthly?
literally
Mm-hmm.
look at this. Well, we look at it daily, like we're looking at the news daily. But in
Mm-hmm.
terms of tracking it, we look at it on a monthly basis. That said, even the United States, the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes what they call the jobs report every month. And this is that report that the U.S. puts out that tells you, what did job growth look like, this month versus last month and previous, right? So and by sector. That's where we start to track and we say, well, there's an interesting thing happening. In the last 3 years, healthcare has just progressively grown month after month after month. Like it just keeps growing and everything that's associated with healthcare, right? So we're not just talking about, clinics and hospitals and things of that nature and medical jobs, but we're talking about health tech. We're talking about medical devices. We're talking about pharmaceutical, like everything that is encompassed within healthcare is on that growth trajectory, right? So, and similarly, education was on a growth. For the United States, government was on the decline because the current administration came in and slashed a lot of government jobs, right? And so we track the movement of jobs within sectors on a monthly basis as that report comes out, right? But we're also, talked about leveraging the strength of our alums. We constantly keep in contact with them. So our alum at JP Morgan, what we say is thanks for that information. We're going to check in with you again, like, in 3 months to see if anything has changed, right? We do that. And then from where we use technology, AI and scrapers is we look at job boards, right? So we look at JP Morgan's job board and we say, well, and LinkedIn, and we scrape information that says actually cluster of employment movement is actually happening in Ohio right now for whatever reason. Like we have one of our students did their CPT internship in Ohio with Toyota, right? He did a corporate finance internship with Toyota. He just finished that internship last month. He graduated last week, and he's now in Ohio because he got the full-time job with Toyota, right? So we look at that type of stuff. Like, where is Toyota hiring? It's easy to find out because you can go to their LinkedIn page and scrape their active job listings. And so that's the type of thing that we do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just a very reasonable effort, but you do leverage all the resources. You can use the alumni, so LinkedIn or AI scraping, such kind of that. Yeah, so actually, we do have seen lots of business school, but so Hope is, I think, the best and ever like making effort to such kind of job analysis and also career support.
I know that to be true. I'll tell you why.
Yeah,
Because my
yeah,
my
definitely.
peers, the managers of the career centers at Boston University, Northeastern, MIT, Babson, Brandeis, we're all part of a group. Like I meet with them every month, my counterparts at the other school, and we talk about this. I talk about like what do they do at their school, and they hear from what I do here, like what we do here. And you're right, we do things differently, right? We do things differently, meaning I've got again 98% of my students are international. I need to go the extra miles to get that insider information or that data that perhaps some of these other schools don't have to do, right? So I do it out of necessity because my students have a finite amount of time to report employment. Otherwise, they're going home, and I don't want to see that. Actually, obviously, the student doesn't want to see that. So we conjure up many different ways to have an advantage when it comes to the job search. And
Yeah.
I give you a few of them, right? But there's others that I wouldn't say publicly because it is secrets. It's stuff it's stuff that we do internally that helps move the needle.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So
Yeah.
actually, the job outcome is very great. Like, so students should be great aware of. So and place great importance of their career outcome. And it is very invaluable help for the whole student, especially for international student at heart. Yeah, thank you. So on the next question. So is there like change of landscape in the job market? So in recent year, the importance of finance has been growing, I think, in terms of job opportunity and also like salary increase. So from an industry perspective, what is behind the finance industry growing?
So in the last 2.5, 3 years, so a lot of the growth, like on investment side, private equity, right? Venture capital to a lesser extent, but private equity here in America, private equity is starting to own everything, right? Like you'll be surprised. They own dental offices, they own medical, they own everything, right? Private equity is just buying up everything. So there's that, okay? But even on the corporate finance side, so in the last 2-3 years, as the economy started to tighten, and we're coming out of this wave of mass hiring post-pandemic. There was a lot of mass hiring, and then companies started to hand out a lot of layoffs to sort of normalize their headcount. But in doing that, financial planning and analysis, so FP&A as a job, as a function, exploded, right? Because again, in a downturn economy, companies are trying to get better with budgeting, get better with forecasting, right? Have reins on financial controls. And so that, from a corporate finance standpoint, that job blew up, right? And a lot of our finance students, if they were thinking about corporate finance, that's where they ended up, FP&A. Which, by the way, essentially is what our student was doing at Toyota in Ohio. It's financial planning and analysis.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that connect nicely to the next question. So due to the impact of Trump's tariffs, companies like Toyota and SoftBank have been investing more in the United States. So is there also hiring demands associated with these trends?
Yeah. So, the goal is to increase manufacturing here, right? And so,
Yeah.
when I was talking about Toyota, and you guys can Google it later, but if you look at the amount of investment Toyota has made in their plant over in Huntsville, Alabama, right? It'll tell you. So everything is trickled down from there, right? So they've got a massive plant. They're obviously going to need finance professionals. They're going to need project management. They're going to need supply chain. All of that is just gonna come up with it, right? Apple, the same thing, right? I didn't watch it, but I saw clips of it. Tim Cook from Apple was at the White House, and he was unveiling the new glass that they're going to use for the iPhone, which is made in America, right? So that's going to continue. So more emphasis on manufacturing and making goods here in the United States, right? So all of that is going to have a positive impact on the on job growth, right? Now, might have a negative impact on trade and our relationships with other countries, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so actually I could honestly listen to you for another 5 hours. Very
I
interesting.
could talk for another 5 hours. Let's do it.
Yeah. So they're very interesting and fascinating. So let's discuss another opportunity.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So, but we'll wrap up here today. I'm truly grateful and very impressed by how dedicated career support and strategic career team here at HOT for the success of every student. So, could you give us a final announcement? I think Shinpei-san have some announcement. So Shinpei-san at first, and then could you give us closing remarks and comments to future MBA candidates?
Sure, of course. Thank you for having time, Nav. まず私からそうですね、3点ほどアップデートがあるので、まずお伝えしたかったんですけども、 そうですね。これは今年の卒業生の最新実績で、日本人の方なんですけども、ナブが言ってた通り、アメリカ全土、特にオハイオとか、テネシーとそういったところにやっぱりトレンドができているというのが、今年からも見えてくるのかなというところで、ぜひですね、これから考えている方は、今日のナブの、最新のトレンドを参考に、ぜひ検討されていただけたらと思いますと。二つ目が、これは冒頭に、坂井さんおっしゃった通り、明日ですかね、土曜日なんですけども、アクセス MBA フェア。これ我々も参加しますし、坂井さんももちろん登壇されるんですけども、虎ノ門で午前中から昼までいるので、まだ登録間に合うと思うので、ぜひ、いらしていただいて、実際私たちと話していただくというのと、最後ですね、2026年。これはもう最初のラウンドが始まっていて、9月の30日までに申請いただくと。で、こちらアルファアドバイザーの方にまず教えていただいて、まず相談いただいて、で、9月末までまだ1ヶ月ほど時間あるので、ぜひですね、このアルファの、奨和金、例えば$5000保証ですとか、EF の英語のコース、あとはデュアディグリー、ちょっと今日はあまり触れてなかったんですけども、デュアディグリー、2つ目のディグリーについては全額100%、オファーされるということで、まだですね、こちらも9月末の第1ラウンド間に合うので、ぜひ、明日のこのフェアもそうですし、これを見られて、特にアメリカ挑戦したいというのであれば、ぜひ、備えたいと思います。私から以上です。So, thank you. Now, can you give us some closing words for our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, here's the thing. I have a lot of respect, right, for people that are on this call, right? It's not easy to make a decision to leave your home country and go study abroad, right? There's a lot of courage involved in there. I personally don't know how that is. I was born in India, but my parents moved to Canada when I was half a year old. I grew up in Toronto. I grew up in Canada, so I didn't have to make that you know transition, but my parents did, right? And as immigrants, hardworking, moved to a new country. And the one thing I could say about them is what I said earlier is this idea of just like us focusing on getting better, right? At whatever that is continuously, learning, upgrading our skills so that we could, thrive in whatever new environment we're trying to go. And even if you're not going abroad, your current environment is changing too, right? But politically, but AI is going to affect it. Things are just going to evolve, and we have to evolve with it. So I just want to say I admire the courage. I always respect the courage that the international student population particularly has. That's why I do what I do. That's why I do it here, because I love helping people make those transitions. I know how important it is for people to also make those transitions. Sometimes we get students from really difficult places of the world, people escaping. I remember when people were escaping Syria, coming to Dubai to study with us on that campus. People leaving Venezuela, people leaving Russia, Ukraine. We're dealing with some real things, right? And so I just let's do everything with intention, right? Together, we do everything with intention so that we can achieve those goals that we have, right? Career-wise, life-wise, whatever it happens to be, right? And thank you for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed doing this today, and anytime you want me to do it again, I'd be happy to come back.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we're very welcome. So yeah, anytime yeah, we can catch up such kind of webinar. Thank you very much. ということでですね、皆さん、今日は非常にインサイトに富んだお話をしていただきまして、全部英語だったんですけども、ちょっとね、あと字幕とかも適宜見ていただきつつ、本当に私は結構今日感動していまして、ハルトはね、いつもこう、キャリア強いよっていう話をしていました。で、アメリカの就職も、特に、非常に成功率が高い。生徒さんもね、インターナショナル、アメリカの外から来てる人が多いっていう話をしていました。が、やっぱりここまでこうキャリアについてマンスリーで情報をもうあらゆる面からですね、ニュースもそうですし、実際にそのアラム内で働いている人からもそうですし、あとはなんか AI とかを使ってね、こういろんな情報を、スクレープ、こう集めてくるとかいったこともそうですし、で、そこまでやっぱり生徒さんのためにね、こう、キャリアの情報を集めて、しかも戦略的に、もうとにかくニューヨークのゴールドマンサックスだけ目指すっていう、もうなんでしょうね、針の穴をこう、なんか通すようなね、戦略だけではなくて、やっぱりみんなが成功するためにどうすればいいのかというところをね、真剣に考えて、こう全リソースをこう振ってくれるハルトさんのキャリアサポート、非常に心強いなと思いますし、やっぱり学校っていろんなランキングであったり、地域であったり、 皆さんがもう単純に行きたいという思いだったりあると思うんですけど、やっぱりキャリアでね、成功するっていうことは一つの MBA のゴールだと思いますし、そういう意味では、本当にこう力強いね、キャリアチーム、キャリアコーチの方たちがいる場所ですし、あとは卒業生のネットワークも、とってもお話聞いてると熱いですよね。みんなを成功させよう、引き上げようっていう感じで、卒業生の方もとてもサポーティブな人たちが多いなと、私もいつも見ていて思います。はい。で、しかも、アルファの奨学金もありますので、なんと、かなり、なんでしょう。授業料ね、いつも授業料で学校を選ぶなという話をしてますけれども、それでもね、別にその、リターンがあればね、リターンが同じであれば、安い方がいいよね、というのもあると思いますし、奨学金もアルファでも、たくさん出せるようになったので、興味がある方、ぜひ、今年受験をして、来年から入学をするというタイムラインで動いていただくといいかなと思います。で、岩田さんからお話ありましたが、9月30日までに申請をして、合格をしていくと、来年、最も奨学金が多くもらえる期間ですね。奨学金、どこの学校でもそうなんですけど、だんだん減っていってしまうので、ぜひ早めに来てください。で、明日の8月3、明日というか今日か、8月30日のイベントにも、ハルトさんね、来られているので、アドミッションの方とか、いろいろお話をして聞いてみたいなという方もぜひお越しください。はい、ということで、皆さんもご視聴ありがとうございました。Nav さん、新平さん、Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.